What if everything you thought you knew about death was incomplete? What if the veil between worlds had been parted not by a mystic on a mountaintop, but by an ordinary man who spoke with extraordinary clarity while in a dreamlike state? What if the greatest mystery of human existence had already been witnessed and documented, but these revelations remained hidden for 8 decades, accessible only to those who knew where to look? This is not fiction. This is not speculation. This is the extraordinary account of Edgar Cayce, a man whose consciousness traveled beyond, while his body remained perfectly still. Born in 1877 in a small Kentucky farming community, Edgar Cayce showed unusual abilities from childhood. He claimed to see and speak with his deceased grandfather. He could memorize books simply by sleeping on them, but nothing in his humble beginnings suggested he would become America's most documented psychic, giving over 14,000 recorded readings. That continue to baffle medical and scientific communities to this day. For over 40 years, Edgar Cayce closed his eyes and spoke of things that science could not explain and religion dared not embrace. He didn't wear ceremonial robes or sit in meditation for decades in a Himalayan cave. He had no theological education, no medical training, no scientific background. He was a simple photographer and Sunday school teacher with a soft voice, penetrating eyes, and an 8th grade education. But when he entered a self-induced trance state, what appeared to witnesses as nothing more than a deep sleep, something utterly remarkable happened. His voice changed. His vocabulary expanded far beyond his waking capabilities. His consciousness seemed to travel beyond the confines of physical reality, accessing information that defied conventional explanation. He could see inside the human body, diagnosing complex medical conditions with uncanny accuracy. He could describe events happening hundreds of miles away. He could speak of past civilizations with intimate detail, but most astoundingly, he could describe what happens when we die with the confidence of someone who had witnessed it firsthand. Physicians initially arrived with notebooks and skepticism, prepared to expose a fraud. They left bewildered, their medical paradigms shaken. Cayce diagnosed illnesses in people he had never met, often hundreds of miles away, suggesting treatments that were initially dismissed as nonsense, but later validated by medical science. He prescribed remedies that wouldn't be discovered by pharmaceutical research for decades. He identified the precise location of pathologies that could only be confirmed through surgery. And he did all this while appearing to be in nothing more than a deep sleep. Scientists tested him under controlled conditions, placing him in sealed rooms, monitoring his vital signs, presenting him with subjects about whom he could have no prior knowledge. The results defied explanation through conventional frameworks. Linguists noted that while in trance, Cayce used technical terminology and languages he had never studied. Historians verified obscure details about ancient civilizations that were only confirmed by archaeological discoveries made years after his death in 1945. But his most profound insights, the ones that truly challenged our understanding of existence, concerned what happens after death. These revelations were so extraordinary, so contrary to both religious orthodoxy and scientific materialism, that many of them remained unpublished, kept from public view for nearly 8 decades. Some were deliberately withheld by the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the organization Cayce founded, to preserve his work. Others were deemed too controversial for the public consciousness of the time. Now they emerge, not as religious doctrine or mystical proclamations, but as testimony from a man who seemed to witness the continuation of consciousness beyond physical death. These are not abstract theological concepts or wishful thinking about an afterlife. They are detailed, consistent descriptions of the soul's journey after it leaves the body. Accounts given not from religious fervor or philosophical speculation, but from what appeared to be direct observation. What makes Cayce's descriptions so compelling is their internal consistency. Across thousands of readings spanning decades, their specificity that goes far beyond vague spiritual platitudes, and the fact that they came from a man who, in his conscious life, was deeply Christian and initially troubled by some of the concepts he himself revealed while in trance. Today we delve into Cayce's hidden visions of the afterlife, not to convert or convince, but to explore the extraordinary possibility that death might not be an ending, but rather a transition into greater awareness. What if the most profound truth about human existence isn't that we are mortal beings who live and die, but eternal consciousness temporarily experiencing physical form? What Edgar Cayce saw beyond the threshold of physical death may transform not just how you understand mortality, but the very purpose and meaning of your existence. The question isn't whether you will die, it's whether you have ever truly understood what happens next. Most people think of death as an ending, the cessation of existence, a final darkness. But according to Edgar Cayce's remarkable trance readings, death is neither an ending nor a beginning. It is a continuation, a transition from one state of consciousness to another. And this transition, contrary to our deepest fears, is not characterized by loss, confusion, or suffering, but by an expansion into greater awareness. According to Cayce, the moment of death is not a plunge into darkness, but an awakening into light. The soul doesn't simply leave the body, it is released from limitations it has carried throughout physical existence. This process, as Cayce described it during hundreds of readings, begins gently, like removing a heavy coat after carrying its weight for years through winter's chill, only to step into the warmth of spring. There is no pain in the moment of transition, he stated during one of his deepest trance readings, while his body lay motionless on his couch in Virginia Beach. There is only release. The soul feels a profound sensation of freedom, as if it had been confined within the body, and is now unrestricted. This description came not as philosophical speculation, but as direct observation, spoken in the measured authoritative tone that characterized his trance state. In these first moments after physical death, Cayce described a fascinating phenomenon. The newly freed consciousness often remains aware of its physical surroundings. It might observe its former body from above or beside it. It witnesses the reactions of loved ones gathered around. It hears the pronouncements of doctors. It sees the tears, feels the grief, and sometimes tries to communicate, to assure those left behind that it still exists, that it is present, whole and undiminished. But this initial phase, this lingering at the threshold between worlds, is merely the first step of the journey. Many souls, according to Cayce, experience what he called the sleep state, a period of rest and integration before moving deeper into non-physical reality. This isn't unconsciousness as we understand it. It's more like a gestation period, a gentle transition that allows the soul to adjust to its new state of being. For some, particularly those who lived with strong spiritual awareness or who experienced prolonged illness before death, this sleep state may be brief or even bypassed entirely. For others, especially those who died suddenly or who held rigid beliefs about death, this period may last longer. But in all cases, Cayce emphasized, it serves the soul's integration and adaptation, not as punishment or delay. After this initial adjustment period, Cayce described in extraordinary detail what he called the sphere of light. Not a physical place with boundaries or geography, but a state of consciousness, a dimension of experience. Here, the soul encounters something that has been described in countless near-death experiences, the life review. Yet Cayce's description, given decades before near-death research began, offers nuances rarely captured in popular accounts. This review isn't punishment or judgment meted out by an external authority. It's remembrance, it's recognition. It's the soul's own confrontation with the totality of its life experience, free from the defensive rationalizations and selective memory that characterized physical existence. In this state of expanded awareness, the soul doesn't simply recall its actions, It experiences them from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Every kindness offered, every harm inflicted, every opportunity embraced or rejected, all are felt not just from the soul's perspective, but from the viewpoint of everyone affected. The person who was hurt by a harsh word, the stranger uplifted. By a small kindness, the child shaped by a parent's presence or absence. All these experiences become directly accessible to the soul's awareness. It is not God who judges, Cayce explained in one of his most profound readings. It is your own soul that confronts the totality of your life experience, and this confrontation happens without defense, without illusion, without the masks we wear throughout our physical existence. This statement came not with fear or warning, but with a tone of profound compassion, as if Cayce, or whatever consciousness spoke through him, understood both the challenge and the liberation this process represents. This experience of complete self-knowing can be intense, even overwhelming by physical standards. But Cayce emphasized repeatedly that its purpose is not to inflict guilt or shame. There is no punishment, no eternal condemnation, no irredeemable failure. Rather, this review offers profound understanding and clarity. The soul recognizes patterns carried across multiple lifetimes. It understands motivations that remained hidden even from itself during physical existence. It perceives the ripple effects of choices, seeing how a single act of kindness or cruelty created waves that affected countless lives. This comprehensive awareness isn't the end point of the journey. It serves as orientation for the soul's continuing evolution. It provides context. It illuminates the path ahead by fully revealing the path behind. It shows the soul what remains unresolved, what lessons remain incomplete, what qualities await development in future experiences, whether in non-physical realms or in another physical incarnation. Most significantly, and perhaps most comfortingly, Cayce revealed that souls are not alone during this process of transition and self-recognition. They are met, guided and supported by conscious entities who understand the journey because they have made it themselves. These aren't angels with wings and harps as depicted in religious iconography, but evolved consciousnesses who serve as mentors, teachers, and companions. Often these guides are souls with whom there was a connection in physical life, family, members who passed earlier, friends whose presence was significant, teachers or mentors who shaped development. This recognition, seeing a familiar consciousness, feeling a familiar love, provides profound reassurance during the transition process. You are not met because of your status, your wealth, or your religious affiliation, Cayce said, with unmistakable clarity. You are not met because you followed correct doctrine or performed proper rituals. You are met because of love. The love you gave, the love you received, the love that connects all consciousness across the boundaries of physical existence. This fundamental truth, repeated throughout Cayce's readings, suggests that the currency of existence beyond physical life isn't belief, achievement, or accumulation. It's connection, relationship, and the capacity for love. This phase of the journey, as described in Cayce's trance readings, doesn't happen in time as we understand it. It might seem instantaneous or might seem to unfold over what feels like years. The soul's experience transcends the linear time constraints that govern physical existence. But for every soul, according to Cayce, it serves the same essential function: orientation, integration, and preparation for the next phase of the eternal journey. One of Cayce's most fascinating and detailed revelations concerns what he called the planetary levels of experience, stages through which the soul progresses after physical death. This cosmology, revealed during his deepest trance states, differs significantly from traditional religious depictions of heaven and hell. It presents instead a complex, nuanced understanding of spiritual evolution that unfolds across multiple dimensions of consciousness. These aren't literal planets in the astronomical sense. Cayce wasn't suggesting that souls travel to Mars or Venus after death. Rather, these are states of consciousness, each corresponding to different aspects of spiritual development. The planetary names serve as metaphors, symbolic representations of energetic frequencies or vibrational states that the soul encounters and embodies as it evolves. The soul doesn't go somewhere else, Cayce explained during one particularly lucid reading. It unfolds into greater awareness of what was always there. This concept challenges our physical understanding of location and movement. In Cayce's cosmology, progression isn't about traveling from one place to another, but about expanding perception to encompass more of what already exists beyond physical awareness. The first level Cayce described is similar to what many traditions call the astral plane. Here, desires, fears, and attachments from physical life are still prominent. The soul remains closely connected to earthly concerns, unresolved relationships, uncompleted projects, unsatisfied desires. Those who identified primarily with their physical existence may find themselves temporarily anchored in this state. It's not hell in the traditional sense, Cayce explained when questioned about this level. There is no eternal punishment, no divine retribution, but it can be a place of confusion and limitation for souls who cannot release their earthly attachments. Some souls might remain focused on physical pleasures they can no longer experience, material possessions they can no longer possess, or status they can no longer claim. Without these external markers of identity, they must confront their true nature, a process that can be disorienting or even distressing. However, Cayce emphasized repeatedly that no soul is abandoned in this state. Guides and teachers remain present, offering assistance when the soul becomes receptive to moving forward. No one is left behind, he stated with unmistakable conviction. No one is forgotten. No one is condemned to remain in darkness. The only limits are those the soul places upon itself through its own understanding and choices. Beyond this initial state, Cayce described a fascinating progression through levels that he symbolically associated with planets in our solar system. Each represents a particular aspect of spiritual development, a specific quality of consciousness that must be integrated as the soul evolves. Mercury, the level closest to physical experience, represents the realm of intellect and communication. Here, souls who sought knowledge continue their pursuit of understanding, but with expanded awareness of how information connects to wisdom. Those who relied primarily on intellectual frameworks during physical life, scientists, academics, philosophers, often spend significant time in this dimension, integrating factual knowledge with deeper understanding. Knowledge becomes wisdom here, Cayce explained, as the soul recognizes that facts without compassion are empty, that information without insight is hollow. In this realm, those who accumulated facts without developing understanding begin to perceive the larger patterns and purposes behind what they learned. Venus corresponds to love and devotion, not romantic love as commonly understood, but love as a principle of connection and compassion. Here dwell souls who cultivated genuine care for others, who practiced forgiveness, who put the needs of others before their own. But this level also serves as a school for those who struggled with authentic connection during physical life. The Venus sphere, Cayce revealed, the soul experiences love without conditions, without expectations, without fear of loss. It feels what it means to be truly connected to other consciousness without the barriers of ego. For souls who lived in isolation or who manipulated others through conditional affection, this realm offers profound healing and transformation. Mars symbolizes the level of struggle and conflict, not as punishment, but as resolution. Here, souls who left unresolved anger, trauma, or conflict address these energies directly. Those who inflicted harm face the consequences of their actions not through punishment, but through understanding. Those who suffered harm release the energetic weight of victimhood. It is here that warriors learn there is no enemy, Cayce stated. It is here that victims recognize their power. It is here that the soul understands that every conflict was an opportunity for greater awareness. In this realm, the soul confronts its own shadow aspects, the denied, rejected, or disowned parts of itself that manifested as external conflict during physical existence. Jupiter represents wisdom and expansion, the realm where teachers and those dedicated to truth continue their development. Here the soul begins to comprehend the larger patterns of existence, the underlying order behind apparent chaos, the purposeful design within seemingly random events. In this sphere, Cayce explained, the soul sees how all experiences were connected, how every challenge contained a gift, how every relationship served evolution. Those who taught others during physical life often find themselves receiving deeper instruction here, preparing perhaps to serve as guides for other souls. In their journey, Saturn signifies tests and trials, not as punishment but as opportunities for mastery. Here the soul confronts what remains unlearned, what lessons were avoided, what growth was resisted during physical life. It's in this realm that karma, which Cayce described not as punishment but as spiritual physics, is balanced and resolved. Every action creates a corresponding reaction, he stated, not as judgment but as natural law. In the Saturn sphere, the soul witnesses these patterns directly and chooses how to bring them into harmony. This isn't experienced as condemnation, but as clarity, an opportunity to resolve disharmonies created through previous choices. The higher levels, associated with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, represent states of consciousness where the soul begins to transcend individual identity entirely. In the Uranus sphere, it experiences itself as part of collective consciousness rather than separate from it. In Neptune's realm, it encounters the mystic dimensions of existence, direct knowing beyond thought or feeling. And in Pluto's sphere, it faces the ultimate transformation, the dissolution of all that is not its true essence. Cayce stressed that movement through these levels isn't automatic, linear, or uniform. Each soul progresses according to its own readiness and understanding. Some might move quickly through certain levels while spending considerable time in others. Some might need to return to earlier levels to complete unfinished integration. The journey isn't forced, but unfolds naturally as the soul evolves in awareness. There is no timetable, he explained, when asked how long souls remain in each state. There is no schedule to keep, no deadline to meet. The soul's progression happens according to its own readiness, not according to external demands. What might seem like centuries from an earthly perspective could be experienced as a moment, in these dimensions where time as we understand it doesn't exist. Perhaps most remarkably, Cayce described what he called the Akashic records, a concept later popularized in various spiritual traditions, but which he spoke of in the 1920s and 1930s, long before it entered mainstream spiritual discourse. These records aren't physical books or scrolls, but rather a dimension of consciousness where all experiences, thoughts, emotions, and events leave energetic imprints that can be accessed and reviewed. The records aren't kept for judgment, Cayce explained when asked about their purpose. They exist for growth, for understanding the patterns of experience that shape the soul's evolution across multiple incarnations. They are the memory of the universe itself, preserving not just events, but their meaning and significance in the larger pattern of existence. In Cayce's descriptions, advanced souls, guides, and teachers can access these records to assist others in their development. During his own trance states, he appeared to tap into this field of information, retrieving details about past lives, karmic patterns, and soul purposes that the conscious individual had no way of knowing through ordinary means. Everything is recorded, he stated. Not a sparrow falls without it being noted. Not a kind word is spoken without it being preserved. Not a harm is inflicted without it being remembered, not for retribution, but for healing and integration. This vast repository of experience serves not as evidence for condemnation, but as resource for evolution, a cosmic memory that allows each soul to understand its journey in the context of all journeys. What emerges from these detailed descriptions is a vision of the afterlife, far more complex, nuanced, and purposeful than either religious dogma or materialist dismissal would suggest. It presents existence beyond physical death, not as reward or punishment, not as eternal rest or endless labor, but as continued evolution, a journey of the soul toward ever greater awareness of its true nature and its connection to all that exists. According to Cayce's visions, one of the most profound revelations about the afterlife is that reincarnation isn't automatic or mandatory, it's a choice. After experiencing various levels of awareness and understanding, the soul reaches what he called the point of decision. Here it contemplates whether to continue its evolution in non-physical realms or to return to earthly existence for further development. This choice isn't made lightly, Cayce explained. The soul, together with its guides and with access to the Akashic records, reviews what remains unresolved, what qualities need development, what understanding requires the conditions of physical life to mature. For souls that choose to return, the process is far more conscious and intentional than most people realize. They don't randomly appear in any available body. Instead, they select specific circumstances, families, cultures, challenges, and opportunities that will best serve their continued growth. What we experience as fate or destiny in life is, according to Cayce, largely the result of these pre-birth decisions. The soul chooses its parents, its time period, even the major challenges it will face, Cayce stated. These aren't punishments, but opportunities, specific conditions that allow for the development of qualities the soul seeks to embody. This explains why some people seem born into circumstances of tremendous hardship, while others experience relative ease. Each soul selects conditions that will catalyze particular aspects of growth. A soul might choose poverty to develop compassion, physical limitations to cultivate inner strength, or intellectual challenges to foster wisdom. Cayce observed that the time between incarnations varies dramatically. Some souls return quickly, within weeks or months of physical death, particularly if they feel a strong pull toward unfinished business or connections with those still living. Others might remain in non-physical states for what would translate to decades or even centuries in Earth time, especially if they're integrating significant lessons or enjoying the expanded awareness of higher consciousness states. Particularly, moving were Cayce's descriptions of soul groups, collections of souls who incarnate together repeatedly, taking different roles in relation to one another across multiple lifetimes. The stranger who shows unexpected kindness, the challenging teacher, the supportive friend, the difficult family member, all may be souls with whom there's a long history of interconnection. There are no accidental meetings, Cayce insisted. Every significant relationship reflects soul connections that often span many lifetimes. The person who frustrates you most may have been your greatest supporter in another life, playing a role now that helps you develop patience or forgiveness. This perspective transforms how we might understand even the most difficult relationships and circumstances. Nothing is random. Everything serves the soul's evolution, even, perhaps especially, the experiences we find most challenging. The most profound implication of Cayce's visions isn't about death at all. It's about how we live. If his insights about the afterlife contain truth, then our current existence takes on extraordinary significance. Each day isn't merely time passing, but an opportunity for the soul to fulfill the purpose for which it chose this particular life. The greatest tragedy, Cayce said, isn't death. It's living without remembering why you came. According to his readings, each soul incarnates with specific intentions, qualities to develop, understanding to achieve, service to render. Yet, the forgetting that accompanies birth often obscures these purposes. We become distracted by cultural expectations, material pursuits, and the ego's preoccupations. This forgetting isn't accidental. The temporary amnesia regarding our soul's larger journey creates the conditions for authentic choice. If we remembered, everything our actions would lack the element of free will that makes earthly experience so valuable for spiritual development. Yet Cayce suggested that we can recover glimpses of our deeper purpose through intuition, meditation, dreams, and paying attention to what resonates most deeply within us. Cayce's visions revealed that the boundaries between physical and non-physical existence are far more permeable than most people realize. Those who have died aren't absent, they're present in a different form. When you think of someone who has passed, Cayce explained, you create a bridge of consciousness. They feel your remembrance, they hear your thoughts. Not because they're haunting you, but because love transcends the boundaries of physical existence. This perspective offers profound comfort to those grieving. Your loved ones haven't disappeared into nothingness. They've transitioned to a different state of being, one in which they remain aware of your connection. The conversations may be silent, the presence invisible to physical eyes, but the relationship continues. Perhaps most significantly, Cayce's visions suggest that fear of death is unnecessary. If people understood what awaits, he said, they would not fear the transition, but would see it as a homecoming. This doesn't mean we should wish for death or fail to value physical existence. On the contrary, understanding the soul's journey increases appreciation for the extraordinary opportunity that embodiment represents. Each interaction becomes meaningful when viewed from this expanded perspective. The kindness offered to a stranger, the patience extended to a difficult person, the forgiveness granted after betrayal, all contribute not just to temporary circumstances, but to the eternal development of the soul. Nothing is wasted, everything matters. At the conclusion of physical life, according to Cayce, the soul doesn't face judgment from an external deity, but rather confronts its own unflinching awareness. Did I become more loving? Did I develop wisdom? Did I serve others? Did I fulfill the purpose for which I chose this life? These are the questions that matter, not whether you achieved wealth, status, or followed specific religious practices. Edgar Cayce's visions, hidden for decades, don't demand belief. They invite consideration. They challenge us to look beyond the material surface of existence to the deeper currents of meaning that might underlie our journey. If even a fraction of what he witnessed contains truth, it transforms not just our understanding of death, but the significance of each moment we live. You don't have a soul, Cayce often said. You are a soul, you have a body. In those simple words lies an invitation to live from a place of greater awareness, to recognize that behind every human interaction, every challenge, every joy and sorrow exists something eternal, something that continues beyond the boundaries of physical existence. The greatest wisdom from Cayce's visions might be this: live as if your choices echo through eternity, because according to what he saw beyond the veil, they do.